But that's not why it's appreciated by Germans. It's appreciated because it's not threatening. Let me actually briefly, because you talk about Canada, there's a wonderful book edited by a Canadian and an Austrian, and it's called Unequal Partners, the comparison of relationship between the United States and Canada and Germany and Austria. Great book. And what you see is the following pattern. The little country, it's exactly the same thing. The little country obsesses about the big country constantly. I don't think one day when I go to Canada passes without people talking about who is Canadian in the U.S., what the U.S. is doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, culturally superior. Same in Austria to Germany. You know, who is Austrian at die Zeit? Who is Austrian? What big? For the big country, the little country basically either doesn't exist, is taken for granted, is a nice vacation land, has good beer or whatever, but is basically not taken. You have this amazing tension. And it's the same thing, by the way. That's why I think size matters. Okay? It's the same. I, for instance, again, my work on Germany, lots of patterns of how the little countries view Germany is similar to how Europeans view the United States. It's the 800-pound gorilla. Okay? Whenever I go to Holland, there's always a big debate about Germany. I don't know why. It just is. You know, what are they doing? What is this? What is that? The same in Austria. Who's taking over which? You know, in Germany, you don't hear about Austria. I do not know one German intellectual who reads Der Standard or the Die Presse. I do not know one American intellectual who reads the Toronto Globe and Mail. I do not know a Canadian intellectual who does not read the Washington Post and the New York Times, and the same in Austria. So what happens is that these big countries clearly are hegemons. They define the debate, and thereby they also create a certain form of irritation. And that's exactly I'm completely, I can just see it. I don't know your friends, but I can just see that in Canada it's kind of this, again, like this friend of mine said, I'm sort of Indian, whatever, yeah, but not of it, you know, by being at the University of Toronto. Yes?
To what extent do you think the collapse of Europe over the last 100 ranging from the collapse of the class system, the collapse of colonialism, and indeed the entire 20th century, ranging from World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, European helplessness, and this really explains part of what you're suggesting.
Yes, but it's interesting that two things. I mean, that help us. I don't think, by the way, I would disagree with you on the disintegration of the class system. The class system just manifests itself differently. In this case, I'm very much of an orthodox Marxist. To me, Michael Jordan is a worker. A very highly paid worker, but he does not own the means of production. If Jerry Reinsdorf wants to, shut him out of the Chicago, the United Center, he does. Michael ain't playing. So anyway, but so I don't think the class structures have disappeared. But I think you're right. But there is a disconnect in the following way. Why does it become, well, first of all, why does it exist even in the European colonial times? That's the first question. Again, the history. This history, not only because I'm always historic-oriented, but I'm so convinced that it's absolutely essential. I did not start out like this. I started basically out in the 90s, and I kind of rolled back, and then I landed with the degeneration thesis. And in fact, of course, someone in Washington told me, Andy, it's way too late. You really got to go back to Columbus, and it really starts, and there's some other guy, basically, really back into the 16th century. Why? I think that the helplessness argument is not totally convincing, is that precisely when Europe actually needs the United States less, that this comes to the fore. In other words, it's not, in the 90s it's much more pronounced, by the way, before Bush, under Clinton, and you can see it. I mean, Hubert Védrine writes his, viciously anti-American when he talks about hyperpuissance. Bush was governor in Texas, nowhere on the horizon. And when the French go totally nuts when at the Denver summit of the G7, for some reason the Clinton administration gives everybody cowboy boots. I don't know whether maybe it's kind of an odd gift, but and they can see this. It's fascinating. You see this prima facie as American arrogance. I mean, how could you, cowboy boots again as this sort of, sort of vulgar and powerful and whatever. Actually, someone should write something about cowboys. I mean, I think they're maligned. I don't know. I think, anyway, just somehow. So it happens in a period when I would argue it's not so much when it is helpless, but when in fact it's starting to become more powerful. So it's really a structure of a rivalry. Okay, it's more in the 90s when Europe is uniting after Maastricht and so on, when in fact it doesn't need the protection against the Soviet Union, that this becomes more powerful. So I don't think it's helplessness, but in fact it's sort of like, the relative deprivation thing. It's not when you're really down, but in fact when you start, when you're, Tocqueville and Marx and whatever argue revolutions don't happen at the nadir of a development, but in fact but in a comparative way. In other words, when you already are starting to take off and you realize what in fact, how this relates to, and that's, I think, what's going on. What is going on is that Europe is now becoming an economic power. Not becoming, it is. It's the largest market. It's a major player. But on the issue of military dimensions, it is not a player. And look, in a certain way, I said this to a number of European audiences. They kind of find this interesting, but ultimately still dismiss it. It seems to me that this major imbalance can only be resolved if Europe actually does, in fact, become a military power. Until then, this will become constant kvetching, okay, to use a Yiddishism here, and basically a sense of impotence, because economically they're big, but on some level they're not, and they're free riders, and this is really very annoying. The question is whether the European publics, I don't see any sign yet at all. Certainly, European intellectuals, Sloterdijk, this German author, has just published a book in which he is calling for the rearmament of Europe, a European army, and basically to confront the United States and whatever. Fine. I don't see this in terms of major publics. I don't see, the German voters wanting to, create a major remilitarization of the French or whatever. I mean, the French and the British more so, but still not in a massive way. And as long as that is not going to happen, I think I see it as that. It's kind of a disconnect at a period when, in fact, Europe is now becoming a major player. The EU is, it's in everything it's in. It's, in fact, you have an EU foreign minister. The EU is a voice. The EU is a player. The EU tells Microsoft, buggers, we're going to punish you to the tune of $650 million. Okay, you have power. Yet, on this other level, they don't. And I think that's the disconnect.
Okay, we got our 30 minutes of question and answers in, and I wish you a good evening, and thank you again for talking to us today.